Thank you everyone for joining today. So good to see everyone. Happy August. Hopefully everybody's had good vacations, good breaks, no sunburns, and are back in somewhat of a routine. I think many of us are back with schools and routine at this time of year. So for those of you all that haven't been on these calls before, Impact Leaders Lab is a private community just for you all that we've created as a select group of sustainability professionals, really to help you develop professionally and solve problems with peers. So for those of you all that don't know me, I'm Shannon Howd, and I get the right people into the right roles to create a more sustainable world and advance personal purpose, as well as potential of leaders so that we can really propel this agenda of saving our planet and our communities forward. And I've been doing sustainability work now for 20 years, recruitment for 30, and I've been running my own coaching business now for 15. So yeah, so I've worn lots of different hats, had a portfolio career myself, have had to reinvent myself many times. And that's why I really enjoy being a career journey partner for you all, and no matter where you are on the path, to really support you to find work that you love and be able to make the difference that you want to make with all of us collectively. I usually weave in a thought for the day. So my thought for today is I've really been hearing a lot from clients that they're struggling with time management and prioritization. I think a lot of us are getting a little burnt out, overwhelmed, kind of there's no end to this never-ending to-do list, lots of moving parts, too many emails, all of that. So I just saw this one pop into my email box yesterday. This is the thought for today that I get into my email box. It's not me, but it's a quote that I received. So many of us have the tendency to postpone even the most important things to the last moment. We assume that we'll be able to get things done later, but sometimes the unexpected intervenes and then everything collapses under the added strain. When I remain focused, I'm able to prioritize. I understand that small tasks can be as important as the larger ones, and I make sure to get them done at the right time. I make sure I leave time for the unexpected too. This lifts the pressure and allows me to give my best in every situation. And I love Bruce Lee's quote, "It's not the daily increase, but daily decrease. Hack away at the unessential." So that kind of has two messages. One is some of the small tasks might be essential and some of the large tasks might be less essential, but it's knowing which of those you can hack away at and which ones need to go up on the priority list so we don't get stressed when other things come onto our plate. The unexpected. I'm struggling with that right now myself. So hopefully that helps you all a little bit get motivated for, again, this autumn full of events and re-energized for our next quarter. So moving on to our fabulous speaker today, Chelsea Mozen, who is the head of impact and sustainability at Etsy, where she has been now for 10 years and has worked her way up from sustainability specialist in energy, that she actually started as during her MBA. And I think you've held maybe 5 or 6 roles. I'll let Chelsea tell you more, but she's consistently moved her way up over those 10 years and is now responsible for their impact and sustainability strategy, which amplifies Etsy's positive impact while achieving its mission, which is to keep commerce human. I love that. With a focus on building long-term resilience, Chelsea works to integrate environmental and social impact throughout the business. Under her leadership, Etsy became one of the first companies to include ESG and climate reporting alongside financial reporting in the 10K. She oversees emissions reductions to meet Etsy's SBTIs, validated net zero scope 1, 2, and 3 targets, as well as Etsy's social innovation and human rights work. It's a lot. Chelsea holds an MBA in sustainability from Bard College and an MA in economics from the New School for Social Research. Welcome, welcome, Chelsea. It's so good to see you after all these years, and thank you for making time to be here and share your wisdom.
Thank you, Shannon. It's really nice to be here. Nice to see you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's great to see all your faces as well. I also just want to start off by thanking you for helping me get my role at Etsy, because it really is because of you that I am at Etsy. So I'd love to share a little bit more about that story, because I always find it so fun. I was doing my MBA at Bard. I was their very first cohort, and Shannon was brought in to help us figure out, career trajectories, paths. And she gave us an assignment as a class and said, look at all the job openings that exist right now. Find the one that you want 10 years down the road, or five or 10 years down the road. It doesn't have to be the one that you're qualified for right now. And come back to me. And sure enough, Director of Sustainability was an opening at Etsy. It was the very first time Etsy had ever had a sustainability position. And I was like, I want that job. And so I came back to Shannon and I was like, I'm not qualified for this job right now. I'm just finishing the MBA, but I really want that job. And so we hatched a plan for a proposal to the hiring manager for that position, that I would do my capstone project with the person that they hired. And I worked with Shannon one-on-one to write the letter. Her edits were extremely helpful. And I think it was that letter that actually landed me that initial position. And then maybe 3 or 4 years later, I ended up in that exact same role that I had identified previously. So yeah, thank you.
It's all you. It's always all you.
No, I know. I really have yes, you really did. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, because it's about getting the message out to the universe, isn't it? Like, once you decide you know what you want, a lot of things will actually conspire to make that happen. I truly believe that, and I think half of it is just being able to identify what you want, and you did that, and you went for it, and look at you now. I love it. It's a great success story. So it's a pleasure. Well, and I look forward to hearing your knowledge today about our theme, which we are focused on the 5 things not to miss when you are trying to align your impact strategy to the business strategy. So this is oftentimes what we call embedding the strategy into core business. And I think it's an interest. Every company kind of does it differently and at different stages of their maturity, but looking forward to hearing your wisdom and insights. Maybe we should just start to frame a little bit what your role is and where you sit in terms of shaping strategy at Etsy, just to give everybody a bit of an idea of where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So over the 10 years that I've been at Etsy, our approach and our purpose of our team has changed dramatically. And I feel like it's been on a little bit of a pendulum swing. Right now, well, I'll say in the beginning, we were not a strategy team. We were doing all the things and we were pretty siloed. And we realized after a few years that that was just not a successful approach, and we had to integrate our work throughout the company. So we went towards building a small but mighty strategy team, and that's where we are now. So our team develops the strategy. We work with other business leaders to ensure alignment. And then once something is approved, it generally gets implemented elsewhere. We generally do not do the implementation. So that allows us to be really laser focused on strategy and utilize our resources effectively and keep a small team, which I think is successful, which enables us to be successful.
Great. So that's actually quite unique, isn't it? I think in the market, oftentimes the teams are trying to do some of the implementation as well, alongside some of the cross-functional teams. So in terms of getting it integrated, I mean, I hear again and again, you got to make sure it's integrated into the core business. And it sounds like you did that with your reporting in terms of integrating it into your financial reporting. So yeah, I don't know. It seems that where we get stuck with getting this integration happening is around getting buy-in and being able to prove that sustainability can create business value. But I'm just curious, why do you think this is so challenging for sustainability practitioners to get this integration into core business?
I think there's a few reasons, but I think at the core, the biggest challenge is around timeframes. So business outcomes are usually very short term. Business units are usually goaled against short term outcomes. And the work that we are doing as long term as sustainability professionals or social impact professionals. And we have a harder time enabling our work to be put up at the same kind of quarterly level sometimes, because it necessarily takes longer. For me, that really feels like the biggest barrier that we have to figure out how to accomplish. And for me, that is really being very clear about what my long-term vision is, as a team, or where we're going with this work. And then what is our longer or medium term strategy? And then what is our near-term strategy? And that near-term strategy, those are the puzzle pieces that make up the longer-term strategy, but breaking it down that way and enabling it to live alongside typical business strategy is, I think, really key.
I think that's a very interesting point, the timeline of things. And oftentimes leadership doesn't see that alignment in terms of the timeline. It's the short-term profits, shareholder returns, et cetera, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we are at Etsy, we have a 2040 and a 2030 net zero goal. No one else in the company has a goal at a 2030 level or a 2040 level. I mean, everyone is really, really used to being goaled on quarterly results, and thinking 10 years out is, it's very not standard business operating procedure. So we have to help those business units think more longer term. And we also have to get better at figuring out how to make our work fit into shorter term segments.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about how you would do that. What would be some ways to kind of, bridge those timeline gaps?
Yeah, it is very hard, because when we're talking about, if you're looking at your KPIs, we're talking about carbon emissions or number of, like for Etsy's case, number of creative entrepreneurs that we support with our grant making. Those aren't things that are really helpful to measure quarterly necessarily. The changes are not extreme between quarters. But we can do it. And we do it. So for instance, we report in our quarterly metrics meeting, what we call it CEO metrics. It used to be monthly, but now it's quarterly. And we report alongside all other business units, and we have our top priorities, and we report every quarter. And even if the metrics haven't moved, really, it's just a great place for us to call out alignment with other business units, and also like where we might be facing blockers or barriers that we can get an executive team buy-in on movement forward. So I think really making sure that you're in the same process that other business units are in, and you're using the same types of metrics. Your results look the same. Like our slide format is the same format as any other business unit is using to report their metrics to the CEO. So just making it look all very similar, making it feel very similar, even if it is different in nature. I think that really helps a lot. I'll also say, in terms of seeking alignment on getting projects integrated or approaches integrated, just really building relationships is, at least in the size of the company that Etsy is extremely important. And then seeking alignment before you're at that point where you need this decision, just constantly, making sure you have the voice of other business leaders in the work that you're doing, and that you're running it by them and not waiting for the perfect product, but early alignment, often alignment, and really open to feedback. So integrating feedback that you get early on and often from other business units.
So how do you do that? Do you have a list of your key internal stakeholders and you making sure you're calling them each week, or what, from a practical sense, how do you stay on top of that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know who all of the other senior leaders are at Etsy, and I'm aware of the ones that I know are really important for the work. So whether it's like, setting up coffee with them or reaching out to them on Slack to share something that you thought might be useful for them, I think that is really, really helpful. I think a couple other tools that I use. I always try to put someone else's name on something. So if there's something that an opportunity to speak or an opportunity to present internally or externally, and if I partnered with another team on that, I would rather them take the credit for it and speak to it, because it then makes it so that they are even more bought in and they feel ownership over that. So I'm always trying to find those opportunities to elevate other people's presence internally or externally. I mean, that goes a long way. Also, I think we read about behavior change theory in the MBA program, and it's something about it stuck with me, and I can't remember the exact book it came from, but it was when you get someone to say yes to pursue an idea or think about an idea, they're bought in at that moment. And then when it comes around to actually implementing the idea, they're more likely to say yes to the actual idea. So I will use that a lot, which is going to either our executive team or another business leader and saying, I'm interested in doing this thing. I don't exactly know yet what the right answer is, but I think if we did some research and explored it, we could come to something that would be interesting. Do I have, is it okay with you if I pursue this? And we'll definitely come back to you with our findings before taking it anywhere else. And then when they say yes to that, then when I come back, they already have a sense of ownership over it. They've already kind of put their name to it, and they're much more likely to say, okay, I see how this, is relevant to the business. And yeah, let's move forward with that. So that's another trick that we use a lot. That not really a trick, but it's just a tactic that works well. And that also allows people to feel like they had ownership from the very beginning of something. You never want to go to a business leader and be like, I have a plan for your work and it's fully baked and here you go. You want them to feel like they had a say in it from the very start.
And in terms of kind of gaining their buy-in for the overall strategy, that sounds more, are you talking more on that one around like initiatives and things that you might want them to have their team help work on, but maybe on a strategy level? Yeah. How do you get them in on the strategy piece?
So I have found that I have I think I mentioned 3 different layers of strategy. One is that longer term vision. That's really something that I keep in my mind. It's not something that I need to get company buy-in on because it's about change. It's about social change, about environmental change that the society as a whole needs to make, and we're not there yet. And it's like, where do I want to be pushing the business and pushing society? What is right for the planet and for people? So, but I have to be clear in my head on that. And the next piece is, how do you then apply that to a longer term business strategy? And I find that type of conversation is best had at the executive team level. So we didn't really get feedback from many teams besides executive level teams when we went to set our impact goals. So our net zero goal, that was directly an executive team conversation. Most folks at other levels in the business are really, like, as I mentioned before, focused on this year, this quarter, maybe next year, but not like a 2030 or 2040 strategy. That is something that our executive team oversees and the board. So I don't necessarily seek buy-in from partners across the team at that level. I go straight to the top on that. But when it comes to implementing the pieces that will allow us to meet our net zero goal or will allow us to meet our creative community DEI goal, that's when I need buy-in at all levels of the company on the smaller strategy pieces. And that's when the executive team, it's not this, they expect us to be able to work with their team. So I don't really go at that level. And that's where I employ some of those tactics we were talking about in terms of getting buy-in and alignment early and often.
So it's kind
Does
of
that
more
make sense?
Yeah, it's more with the people that are in those cross-functional teams that are going to have to help you deliver on the strategy, really, it sounds like. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's also hard to ask you have to ask the right folks for the right things. So people who are thinking about the business in the long term, that's where you go to ask about the long-term strategy. And that tends to be, at the executive level. And then for the near term, things that we could do to meet our longer term strategy as a company, then it's a different set of people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is there anything that you all do at Etsy in terms of incentivizing through, professional development or ways to kind of get people, if you're thinking about the short-term goals that business people have, right? How do you get them incentivized to also think about a kind of a longer term sustainability agenda?
Yeah, I would say that my experience at Etsy is that most people care and already want to do something. It might just be, the company that Etsy is, and I have it easy in that regard. But generally everyone's keen to figure out how to make this work. The only, difficulty comes in when they're goaled against something that's different than what I'm trying to work on. And then that's a case where we have to just sometimes say, oh, excuse me, let's figure out how we can carve out from your OKRs, work on this particular thing if it's not going to ladder up to your OKRs that you have right now. It might ladder up to a company goal around emissions, but it might not ladder up to your specific quarterly OKRs. So then we can go to their manager or to their executive member and ask for that carve out, and that's possible.
Mm-hmm. And so at the executive level, if that's kind of where it sounds like where you kind of have to start, right? Is what happens if they don't buy in? How do you, what are your tactics for that to shift the mindsets?
I want to say, I don't think you necessarily start at the executive level on everything. I think you have to have both at the same time. You have to more of a grassroots and a top down and bottom up at the same time. If you look only at one and not the other, you'll become imbalanced. But I do think there's, as I mentioned, definitely the moment where you have to this is a top down issue. I need a top down decision. And so, in the cases where you don't get buy-in, first of all, I don't think you should ever be in a position where you're presenting something that you're not going to get buy-in. You should know going into a room whether or not you're going to have buy-in, and you should be doing your background work ahead of time. So before we go to present to our executive team for approval we go annually for our approval for our next year's impact goal updates. I know more or less, unless there's a curveball thrown at me, that I have this executive team members buy in on the goal that relates to their org, this one on that one. And I know that everyone is aligned, and I've done the pre-work. So I'll meet with executive team members individually. I'll meet first with their teams, their VPs, in order to make sure they're aligned. And if they're aligned, then I'll meet with executive team members. So it's a lot of socialization, and that might be specific to Etsy's culture, but it's what works. And in my experience, going in without having done that socialization before you go into a big executive team meeting, you're just not going to be as successful. So that's So would
you be doing that individually with each of those executive leaders?
Mostly individually. There are some cases where you can pair them up. For instance, our CPO and our CTO generally work together. So we'll often meet with them together. Their teams are very close. But sometimes you actually need to find out what it is about that specific person that makes that, or that what about your work, I'll say, resonates with that specific person. So it might be an interest they have in a specific topic, or it might be something personal, like their kids really care about solar energy. You kind of, it's helpful to tease that out, and you can do that best, I find, on a one-on-one level. So it's a lot of work socializing, but I'll say it's never work that is ineffective or spent. It's never a waste of time. It's absolutely worth the time. And but it does, I think it's one of the most important steps.
So it's understanding that person better to know what matters to them, but also, you know, and then knowing how you can adjust what you need their buy-in on to make it more relevant for them.
Yeah, I'd say understanding what matters to them personally, what matters to them as a manager, and then what matters to them from business performance. Like, what are they goaled against? What are they trying to drive in the business right now? What are their key priorities for the business? And how does your work support their priorities? You want to think about these things as not of like, how can you help me? But like, how can I help you? And that is the most powerful thing. But I think it is, the three things I mentioned are really important to call out. Their business priorities for the business. That's very important, but also understanding what their employees care about. So our CTO has a lot of engineers, or mostly engineers, that are in her unit, and it's a very large organization within the company. Those engineers typically care a lot about sustainability, environmental sustainability, and they are very vocal, which is wonderful, and it creates the Etsy culture. That might be a different consideration for a different executive team member who doesn't have a lot of engineers who are as vocal under them. So knowing the different needs, managerial needs of your executive team members is also helpful. And then I'll just speak to the personal, like, we think business and personal life shouldn't be intertwined sometimes, and then sometimes they're completely intertwined. And I really think understanding, even though it feels like this should be judged purely on business needs, I do think understanding how these issues resonate with people personally is helpful. For instance, when we had our current CEO, Josh, was new in 2017, and we had just gone through a large 2 rounds of layoffs and restructuring of the company. And we were really quite scared about, what does this mean for our work? What does this mean for the future of impact work? And in the end, I didn't have anything to be worried about. Like, he's been such a great supporter. But in one of the very first meetings, he brought his kids to work with him, and we got to meet the kids, and we took them around and gave them a little tour of the office. And we have a very nice kind of demonstration solar array on our roof in Brooklyn. It doesn't provides less than 1% of our energy in the Brooklyn office, but it's a great place where people can see solar, and how it works. And I took his daughter and his son up there and showed them the solar array, and they were just they thought it was so cool. And I could tell that oh, that mattered. That was an important moment where I connected to our CEO's children about the thing that I'm trying to drive at the company. So those personal things I think they do matter, and they do last, and they are important to understand.
I like that. It's a bit of an anecdote for the next generation too, right? But the younger generations are easier to convince. They tend to care a lot about this just out of the gate. So there is a lot of hope.
Yes, yes.
So as we close our Q&A portion of this and open it up to the wider Q&A with the group, is there anything you want to leave us with in terms of just top tips, or anything you didn't get to cover that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think I have a few things. I'll try to be quick. One is that businesses change. Business needs change a lot. I'm sure you all know that. Different things move quickly and change a lot. And I find that it's really helpful to be ready for those changes. So I might not always be able to pitch the thing I want to do or work on the thing I want to do at this current moment. But the business may change quickly in 6 months, and then it's the right time, and I have to start quickly. I can't then start the process of doing research and figuring out like if this will work. I need something that's kind of ready to go. So I'd say like be ready with your thing, but it might not always be the right moment. Don't go out with a thing if it's the wrong moment. Wait for the right moment. Or if you find that business needs change and you have to deprioritize something that you were really passionate about, it's frustrating, but it's okay. Put it on the back burner. Don't forget it. And the right moment will come back around. And that's something that we've done a lot at Etsy and this work. And it always ends up working out. And then one other like piece of advice or thing that I think about a lot in a corporate sustainability job, that it can be sometimes hard to have this job in the sense that you become really loyal to your company at a fault. And I believe obviously loyalty to my company is very important, but I firmly believe that my first level of loyalty is really to the issues, to driving positive social and environmental impact and change in the world. And then loyalty to the company comes after that. And I believe that that actually makes me better at the job that I was hired to do and that my company wants me to do. So I think sometimes it means you have to be willing to speak out or say things that other people don't want to hear. And that is actually fine. And that's why we were hired. And we have to always remember that. And then if you do your relationship building and you've done all that work to consult with partners, you're prepared for that. It won't be a negative. People will trust you even more for speaking out, and it'll be received well. So those are some things that I think about in these types of roles.
I like that. I've never heard someone articulate that, the kind of commitment to the mission and the issues first, and then the company. Because you're right, you can sometimes be so loyal to the company or the agenda or the needs of the senior leadership that you get a little muddled on the actual bigger picture.
I think so. I think it makes you a better practitioner. And I think it makes you more effective and your leadership prefers you like that in the long run, always in the long run.
Yeah. Well, we're in the long run, aren't we, in sustainability, as you started with today. So, well, good. Let's open up, Chelsea, to the group. If anybody wants to raise their hand that they want to be asking questions.
Chelsea, I do curious what you were looking at as a career before you discovered a sustainability career.
Oh, that is fun. I was in the NGO space, and I had been doing a number of things, grassroots organizing in my early days, and then public policy advocacy. And most recently, before I went to the Bard MBA, I was working on a project around community-owned wind development in Oaxaca, Mexico. And so that is the reason why I went to the Bard MBA. I was like, I don't know anything about business. I want to figure out how to make this community-owned utility-scale wind farm work. We need a business plan. Let me go get an MBA, which was really probably not that smart of me at the time, but because that wouldn't solve my problems with needing to get a business plan for the wind farm off the ground necessarily. But what it did do was great, and that it opened my eyes to the world of corporate sustainability. And that is where I was like, oh, this is what I need to be doing. This fits for more of my personality type and the way that I drive change.
And I was also kind of curious because with Etsy, I mean, it's completely remote. What are some of the major issues you're concerned about? Is it the carbon footprint of people mailing lots of packages to each other, or what is one of your big concerns? I mean, I know that's something for Amazon, but Etsy is a smaller scale certainly than Amazon, and it's mostly a retail business of shipping.
Yeah. So we have, let me just check the numbers right now. We have more than 100 million items listed for sale on our two-way platforms. So it's Etsy.com. It's also Reverb, a marketplace for used musical gear, and Depop, secondhand clothing. So between our three brands, we have 8.8 million active sellers and 96.6 million active buyers. So we do have a lot of shipping from point A to point B and extremely distributed across the globe. So shipping is our largest category of our footprint. And then packaging is a large one, and purchase goods and services is pretty large as well. So that on the environmental side, we're thinking a lot about how we reduce our footprint. We have the SBTI aligned net zero goal, and we've been making progress on it each year for the past 4 years. And then also we're looking at climate resilience for our sellers with a very large distributed network of sellers who all work from home for them, but not all, many of them work from home. How can we help our sellers with climate resilience as the extreme weather events ramp up? And then on the social impact side, how can we help our sellers succeed? How can we support small businesses? How can we support craft and craft entrepreneurship? So a lot of good topics. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the business model can't change. The shipping is going to have to stay the same or increase if the business is to grow. So that's kind of a curious issue that you face. How do you reduce your carbon footprint, which just means that less sales will be made if less packages can be shipped?
No, not exactly. So we've identified a number of levers, and I'll say one thing I actually didn't get to say earlier. One of the most important things I think that we should be working on is advocacy, public policy advocacy. So when we're thinking about shipping and the move to the decarbonization of transportation, advocacy is one of the most important things we can do right now, especially when we're thinking about longer term goals. So we've been very active in the public policy sphere in terms of supporting higher emission standards, in terms of supporting electrification of fleets. So all of those things will drive our footprint down, as well as we do have, within our own product, we can encourage local, we can encourage greener shipping options. We can also work with our current carriers to encourage them to electrify their fleets. So we actually have quite a number of levers.
Thank you for explaining that.
I think that might cover John's question, which is what is the biggest challenges for Etsy with respect to sustainability. So I think that kind of covers that one. I'm wondering if you want to go to Neen, your question. Thank you, Meryl. Neen, are you with us? Okay, I might ask Neen's question. Love to hear how you're managing controversial content, especially in this political moment.
Controversial content, what do you mean by that?
Probably having to do with ESG and some of the backlash, I think, probably that we've seen across some sectors.
But not content on the platform itself, like the things that buyers and sellers are selling. I'm sorry, not buyers aren't selling, the things that our sellers are selling, or
it looks like they're saying items sold.
Yeah, items sold. Yeah, we have a whole team that looks at that. I don't manage that area of work at all, but we have an amazing team that is working on that and are looking at how do we develop the right levels of controls for the items in our marketplace.
Great. And we've got Carol. Do you want to ask your question? Carol.
Sure. Good. It's good afternoon here. I'm in London, and Chelsea, it's very interesting to hear your views. I spent nearly 40 years in financial services as a global chief operating officer, so I understand what you mean by socializing and speaking to lots of people to get buy-in to make changes. But for Etsy, my question's got a few parts, but what systems do you use to capture and report your scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions? And why did you choose that system? And then what challenges do you face in capturing and reporting the scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions?
So we have been capturing and publicly disclosing on our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions since 2013, even before I arrived to Etsy, and then assurance or on those scope 3 since 2015 or 2016. So we have a pretty robust process, a robust system. And actually that work used to be on my team, but one of the things that I did to integrate this work in the business was give that headcount away to our accounting team. So it was hard to release a headcount when I'm a very small team, but we knew that like in order to really make this work at the level it needed to be in the accounting org. So now we have an ESG analyst that's sitting in our accounting org or our finance org and our accounting function within the finance org. And they are managing the process, but systems, we use a number of systems. Our shipping emissions come from our internal system because we have all the data on, ship from zip code, ship to zip code, or location, whatever that might be. So we have to use an internal system and we calculate it internally, and then we get PwC assurance on that process. Same with packaging. For things that are a little bit more standard, and many of our scope 1, 2, or purchase goods and services where we don't have supplier specific emissions factors, or like employee commuting or travel, we now use Watershed, which I'm sure you've heard of. They seem to be the big player these days, or one of the big players these days, but we've used other systems before. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that we have
you.
a robust process for internal audit and then external assurance. That's all run through our SEC accounting team, as we do report on all of these things in our 10K.
Yeah, that was interesting when we first started talking earlier, Chelsea, about where you sit in the business. That was another question someone had. And you said you used to report to the chief operating officer, who is now the chief operating and marketing officer. And that sometimes people say it would be better to sit and report up to the CFO, but you didn't agree. Do you want to just say a little bit about, the fact that you now have this person in the finance team, but yet you're still thinking that operations and marketing is the place for your team to sit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you want to be a strategy team, then finance might not be the best place. And obviously it depends on the structure of your company, but a lot of our marketplace facing improvements or launches or decisions really sit in our operations space, and that's where our big opportunity is at Etsy. I mean, practically our work spans across every single org at the company. I work closely with workplace, I work closely with HR, I work closely with legal, I work closely with finance, closely with engineering and product. But I think if you, like for us, our chief operating and marketing officer has a real strategic view of where we're going. And that's where it makes sense for us to sit. But I will say that I might be saying that because we've always had such a great champion in our CFO. She's been willing to launch integrated reporting in the 10K. We did that in 2018 or 2019 on fiscal year 2018. So we were well ahead of the curve on that. She was willing to step out and lead on that. And maybe that I'm willing to say that don't sit in the CFO because she's always been such a supporter of the work. So I think it really depends on your specific context in your company.
Yeah. Well, great. I think we have time for one more question, Chelsea. Heather is asking, Heather, are you there? Do you want to ask your question?
Everyone. Thanks, Chelsea, for your comments. So interesting. I just wondered if you would talk a little bit more about how you integrate your social impact strategy with your environmental goals to ensure that you have a cohesive strategy overall and actionable.
Thanks for the question. That's a great question. We have in our 10K also published our what we call our ESG framework. And as a part of that, we have our top 3 goals for environmental, social, and social governance, not really goals, but more work that we do. And our CEO has always, since the day he started, very big fan of prioritizing. So like we need the top three. So we distilled our strategy into this top three public goals on the environmental side and top three public goals on the social side. On the social side, I mentioned a few of them on the environmental side already. On the social side, employee DEI, which I don't lead, another team leads that, but we would collaborate very, very closely. Supplier DEI and creative community DEI. Supplier DEI, I think, is pretty clear what that means. Creative community DEI for us is really about how we're supporting our creative entrepreneurs and driving impact above and beyond the sales on the marketplace. Of course, this is an interesting area for us at Etsy because our entire business model by its very nature is one of social impact. So enabling small businesses to succeed, enabling small makers or small vintage shop owners to be able to sell and have a living. So it is very interesting. So for us, we think, what can we do above and beyond that? How can we magnify that? The fact that our business model is by nature, one of social impact. What can we do to make that even more impactful? So in this work, we are even more integrated across the company. I mean, it is just core to what we do as a company. So there's a lot of points of integration. And then we see moments where the two, like the environmental impact and the social impact, come together too. So our climate resilience work is one of those areas where we look at the impacts on our sellers and also the environmental impacts and how those two interplay.
Shannon, can I do a follow-up real quick?
Sure.
So Chelsea, from a human rights perspective, does that then get embedded from obviously there's a big DEI focus, but human rights as a major swath and all that comes under that, does that also wed across the environmental and social impact strategies?
It does. We're not currently goaled against a human rights topic right now. I could see that changing in the future, but it is one of these. We have a number of areas that are kind of cross-cutting ESG. For us, human rights is an issue that covers environmental, social, and governance. And we're working on all three fronts on that issue.
You.
Great. All right. Well, I think we are almost out of time. We could probably keep going, no problem. But I just wanted to say a big thank you to you, Chelsea, for sharing all your wisdom and for your time today. Thank you all for your great questions. We did pull through with questions. I think everyone was just so into the Chelsea, your overview that they didn't have their questions at the ready. So next time I'll get people going earlier. But we also have an amazing lineup of change leaders in the coming months. In October, we've got Daniel Ingram, who's a partner and head of responsible investing at Aon. And then in December, we've got the CSO of International Paper, who is Sophie Beckham. And February, the executive director and global head of ESG and sustainability at Organon, which is Byron Austin. And April, the deputy CSO at the White House, Dee Siegel. So there'll be a lot of change before we get to her in April. We'll see where we are, but just want to say thanks to everyone again for being here, and we hope to see you all in October, if not before. Thanks again, Chelsea, and see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.